Hi, today we're going to watch Apple's technology update from January 1997. It covers System 7.6. System 7 was Apple's Macintosh operating system, which was released in 1991. In 1993, it had a peak market share of 10.7% compared to MS-DOS's 76+%. However, in 1995, Microsoft released Windows 95, which drew customers like crazy. Apple saw a massive decline in System 7 use, and System 7.6 was meant to address that. This Apple technology update is from before Steve Jobs returned to Apple, and it's missing all the presentation that he brought back to the company. There's no black turtleneck, there's no black background, there's no stage presentation. It's very dry and intended for IT staff, retailers, and the Apple Evangelist program. So let's have a look at what Apple wanted us to know about System 7.6. In the beginning of the videotape, you'll notice that there's no audio. It's just an artifact from it being on videotape. The audio cut out, so apologies for that. He's probably telling you his name, which is really important. But
Macintosh OS directions.
I don't have
Simply Mac OS 7.6. What you'll be seeing today is a number of demonstrations, as well as receiving information from myself, as well as a number of product managers that cover internet, multimedia, and component software.
I told you this was dry.
With that, let's take a look at Mac OS 7.6 features specifically. The key thing with Mac OS 7.6 is we want to continue on Apple's historical ability to make complex technology very simple. So what you'll be seeing in the first part is 7.6.
I wonder what they used to make the
as you would
slideshow.
expect, advances the total user experience. We'll do that as well as incorporating our latest technologies,
Maybe PowerPoint?
specifically internet and multimedia technologies. We also want to build on our release strategy of how we want to deliver software technology on an incremental 6-month basis. This chart that I have here gives you a good idea of how we want to deliver that. Every 6 months, release a major reference release where Apple's taking care of delivering the integration for you, as well as every 3 months, looking at how we do an update for that specific reference release.
Let's talk about this for a second, because we're talking about frequent updates for an operating system. This was a new thing at the time. Most people would have to get a new CD either in a retail location or have to call Apple or fill out an online form, and you can get an update on CD. Downloading updates from the internet were possible, but rare. We're talking about downloading at 28.8 kilobits per second, which means a 200 meg update could take several hours to download. And if the connection was interrupted or if there was any kind of glitch, you had to start all over because the data would be corrupt. This was a pretty big deal at the time. And it was also at a time during Apple's history where there was a lot of turmoil going on with operating systems. I'm sure they were in talks with Steve Jobs for his return at the time. He had Next Step operating system, which a lot of people thought would become the next version of Mac OS that was codenamed Copeland. BOS was in the works. In fact, the Apple evangelists at the time were getting copies of BOS to run in Mac OS, and you could dual boot your system with BOS and Mac OS or System 7 on different partitions. There was a lot of change going on. We didn't know what was going to happen. Apple had just switched over to their PowerPC platform, which was using RISC architecture, up from the Motorola 68000 series of processors. Stuff was changing constantly. So announcing that frequent updates were going to happen was a pretty big deal.
Release where Apple's taking care of delivering the integration for you, as well as every 3 months, looking at how we do an update for that specific reference release. What we think this does is gives you a much better way to plan for and decide when to deliver our specific releases of software throughout your organizations. With that, let's look at some of our specific 7.6 technology.
Now here's the good stuff.
Along with making Mac OS 7.6 a lot easier to use, we've also improved the install process. What we found in the past was a lot of times a user wouldn't understand the different steps they needed to do to go through and install the operating system software correctly. In this case, we pulled that all into one location, so it's very easy to flow step by step. In this case, in my Mac OS installer, I've already done step 1 and 2. In this case, I'll click on my third step, which is to select a drive I want to install to. I'll click Select.
Windows 3.11 had pretty decent installer experiences. There were different companies that made different installers, but they walked you through what you were doing. If I remember correctly, Apple's experience was a little bit more dry than this, but installing an operating system took a long time. You were installing from many floppies, or more likely at this time from a CD, and there was a lot of stuff to cover. CD-ROM drives weren't very fast, but you wanted to know everything that was going on, so this would help explain what was going on a little bit better than just crossing your fingers and hoping it would finish correctly.
Select. In this case now I'll go to my fourth step, which is picking which specific software I would like installed. So in this case, maybe I do things on my network to access the internet, and I would like some other.
All right, let's talk about CyberDog right there. That was Apple's proprietary browser before Safari, and they had this weird plug-in system where, I shouldn't even say plug-in, this like drag and drop clipboard system where you could take content from different applications and put them into other applications. So you could clip the content from a web page and paste it into a text document in a writing program like WordPerfect, kind of like Microsoft Word, and everything kind of worked together. As a student in college at the time, that was really exciting. It looks like something really cool, and at the time it was really cool, but it didn't live very long. But those kind of features have stuck around, so we have a lot of stuff like that left over today.
Features. Now I'm ready to go, and I can click Start. Here it's also checking your hard drive for any inconsistencies transparently to the user. One of the things people have been asking for is a better way to manage their extensions. With 7.6, we give you that functionality. Here, for example, I'm looking at...
All right, so extensions were system libraries that loaded when the computer booted up. So when a Mac would boot in the old days, at the bottom of the screen, you'd see all of these library extensions loading, and these were called extensions. And they would do everything from load drivers like for your Ethernet, or enable your CD-ROM drive, allow third-party software and hardware like a tablet, a digitizer tablet to work. Or if you had a weird monitor, I had a monitor called a Radius that you could rotate 90 degrees and it would be in portrait mode instead of landscape mode, which is really nice for coding back then. You needed a special driver for that. So all that stuff was loaded as an extension, but it's important, especially if you had limited memory, because Apple computers were very dependent on memory at the time, and they weren't great at handling swap. But if you weren't going to be using that weird monitor that rotated or a digitizer tablet or anything like that, you could disable the extension, and that's pretty cool to be able to do it this way rather than the old way, which was to drag them from your active extension folder to like an inactive extension folder so that they wouldn't load on startup. But still, whatever changes you made here would only be effective when you restarted your computer.
Our extension manager, and I could view items either by name. In this case, I can go down and click on a certain item, and if I wanted to, I could get more information on that, such as specifically what that item allows you to do. I can also look at items by, for example, by folder, as they're typically organized in the system folder, in this case by either control panel or by the extensions control panel. Or maybe what I want to do is look at those as I installed them on my system, or in other words, as the package that they were installed. So let's say in this case I was using Apple Remote Access, and I either wanted to turn all those pieces on or off. I could do that simply with one click. Another nice feature is the ability to save our sets. In this case, what I can do is create a new set and call it whatever I'd like to and save that set. So in this case, I can go back and look at a folder.
I did this. I would have my creative set where I would use that for Photoshop or whatever design program I was using. And then I even had a gaming set that would enable my joystick plug-in or my joystick extension, stuff like that. Restart my computer just for whatever I was doing at the time. It was a pain, but it worked.
I might decide that I really wanted to send that to an alternate printer. Well, I can select that now from a dialog box at this stage in the printing process. What's also nice is I can look at some of the other features associated with these printers. In this case, for example, maybe I want to look at the layout and change that to have it print 4 pages per sheet.
Printers were a pain in the butt to
Other
use.
features I can look specifically at a printer
back in the day. You needed to have very specific drivers for them. How they handled color, if they could handle color, was a pain. They all needed special drivers. They all had their own special software. But being able to visualize that, especially for creative people that were using Apple computers, was a big deal at the time.
Here's our Apple System Profiler. What the System Profiler is helpful for is determining what type of information is installed on your computer, both from a hardware or software perspective. So in this case, we can look at some of the system information that happens to be on our machine. We could also go down and select other types of information, for example, device information or volume information for what's on our hard drives. What's very nice about this is our customer care code.
People cared about this. I know this seems silly, and you can find out the information on your Windows computer or Macintosh just like you could back then, but this was a new feature. So would Steve Jobs present this on a stage wearing a black turtleneck? No.
I'm Jonathan Knowles, product manager for Apple's QuickTime technology. Mac OS 7.6 includes QuickTime version 2.5. QuickTime version 2.5
I like that he's still wearing his ID badge. He just took a break from a meeting to record this.
More innovative multimedia technology from Apple. Most people's perception of QuickTime is small, jerky, postage stamp video playing on their computer screen.
So true.
However, with
no
today's
hardware
QuickTime,
acceleration at the
we
time.
can play
QuickTime was a big
full-screen,
deal.
full motion video in software only that looks this good.
Did you see the tearing from showing it full screen? Probably 15 frames per
But
second.
bigger, better, smoother is only one of the ways we can innovate with QuickTime technology. Another is by supporting different media types. For example, QuickTime has a text track, and with QuickTime 2.5, we have an API that allows capturing closed caption information directly into the text track at the time you digitize
Talking about
the video.
APIs.
This allows me to search the video for words actually
Definitely this was
said
made
in
for
dialogue.
more technical
In this example,
folks.
I have a music video, and I want to know, where does the artist say the word got? When I start playing it now,
Got into an accident and
right
That's
there.
if it has a text track.
This
This
is very
wasn't
powerful.
on any
Imagine
video that you
searching the
imported.
internet for information on a particular subject and getting video clips as a result of your search. QuickTime 2.5 also includes support for Apple's QuickTime MPEG extension that allows you to play back MPEG content in software only on any PowerPC computer. Because it's done through QuickTime, it allows you to do some things that you typically couldn't do with MPEG content in the past.
crater is actually the collapsed
For
caldera
example, I may want to
enormous
play this
volcano.
video fast forward, or even in reverse. Or I may even want to copy and paste MPEG content
This was such a big deal.
throughout the Macintosh application space.
MPEG video, it was the new thing. It was an encoding standard that was infantile at the time, but it was a much better way to compress video. And being able to move through compressed video quickly without needing a hardware accelerator was a pretty big deal. On the PC side of things, there were already sound cards that had MPEG acceleration for audio, and video cards that had MPEG acceleration for video. But being able to do it in software only on a PowerPC computer, we're talking like 601, 602, 603 processors, probably around this time, 603s. This is before the G3 came out and stuff. It was a pretty impressive deal. Still, this is super geeky and super techy. Trying to explain this on the sales floor to somebody, all you could say is, hey, you can watch video and it'll fill up your whole screen, and that would be impressive by itself.
Walls rise nearly 2,000.
Another innovation to QuickTime in QuickTime 2.5 is to the QuickTime music architecture. QuickTime includes a software synthesizer that allows me to synthesize a variety of instruments. In this example, I'm going to play a 10K MIDI file and use the QuickTime software synthesizer to synthesize a piano. Keep in mind, this is not a recording, but a file using the QuickTime music architecture that's only 10K in size. A clear advantage when talking about multimedia on the internet. One of the other advantages of this technology is the ability to change the instrument at the time of playback. So, if you don't want to hear this played back on an acoustic grand piano, but an organ, no problem. We simply tell QuickTime to use the organ instrument.
This is really hard to make a big deal out of, but it was really cool at the time. In fact, if you had a MIDI interface that you could plug into the back of your, through your Apple data port on the back of your computer, which I did, you could plug it into another keyboard. At the time, I had a Yamaha keyboard with an OPL chipset. You could listen to it with a much better set of MIDI instrument sounds, and I did that all the time. We used to play Name That Tune with MIDI songs, and I probably had hundreds. I still do have hundreds of MIDI files. Just the ability to do that through QuickTime in software without paying anything extra was pretty impressive. Friends of mine that were using PCs, that were using Cakewalk software and stuff like that, they could do it, but they had to pay for extra software, obviously extra hardware if they wanted to use different sound sets, or whatever came with their Sound Blaster when it came to sound fonts. I would argue that Sound Blaster sound fonts sounded better, but you had to buy an expensive sound card and have all the other compatibility in your computer just to get it working. It wasn't just plug and play, which was a term that was used frequently at the time. For Windows users, there was a bit of pain where this was built into Mac OS, and System 7.6 was definitely wanted to show this off.
With QuickTime 2.5, there's an API that allows you to play back any instrument you want. It's as simple as dragging a sound file and dropping it in a QuickTime movie, and that becomes your instrument. There's lots of new exciting features in QuickTime 2.5. I encourage you to take a look at the QuickTime website at www.quicktime.apple.com for the latest information.
All right, there was a Bush video just playing.
You to take a look at the QuickTime website at
There we go.
www.quicktime.apple.com
There's Gavin
for the
Rossdale.
latest information.
So, I worked in a Radio Shack store until 1998 or so. So I was probably working at no, I was working at a web development company by now. But before that, I worked at a Radio Shack store in retail for a year or two. And there was a multimedia computer there on sale that had a demo loop that was playing off. It was a CD with a video on it. And it played a loop that had a short clip of a Bush song looping on it. And it drove me nuts. Apple operating system CDs always had a video file hidden on them somewhere so you could show off the video capabilities of your computer. And they had Bare Naked Ladies on there and stuff. I'm pretty sure that the same song was on an Apple operating system at some time hidden in there. I could be wrong. Put something in the comments if I'm full of it. Every time I see a clip from the 90s of a Bush song or Bush video from that band, I have PTSD from working at that Radio Shack and hearing that over and over and over again.
Hi, my name is Richard Ford, and I'm the product manager for Open Transport. I'm going to talk for a minute or two about networking in macOS 7.6.
And we're really going to get technical right now.
New with macOS 7.6 is Open Transport, which is now included as a standard part of every system installation. Open Transport was first introduced in 1995 with the PCI PowerMax and has been included with larger and larger numbers of systems as time has progressed.
All right, Open Transport is TCP/IP and networking stack for macOS. And the networking stack was not a standard part of operating systems earlier. You had to install a TCP/IP stack or similar to use it. So starting in the early 90s, let's say 93, 94, you'd install Trumpet WinSock in Windows. You had to configure very minute details for networking to work, and that included networking over phone lines to connect to the internet or other systems. I'm not talking like BBS. BBS software, and if you don't know what BBS software is, that's another video I'll do sometime. BBSs were a direct phone line connection directly to another system, and they didn't work over a networking protocol, so you didn't have to install anything. But not having to install and set up your TCP/IP stack made connecting to the internet, which was still relatively new at the time, much easier to do. So we're going to get really technical here with this section, but it was a pretty big deal also. I know I keep saying that, but it's true.
This is the first release where Open Transport is the default install on all systems. Open Transport offers new human interface, which we'll take a look at shortly, new protocol implementations, and standards-based APIs. Open Transport also runs on older macOS versions, including 7.1, 7.5.3, and 7.5.5. Let's take a look at some of the human interfaces differences between Open Transport and the older networking system. In particular, Open Transport has replaced the network control panel and the MacTSP control panel that were familiar with classic networking with new control panels, the AppleTalk control panel and the TCP/IP control panel. The human interface has also been now enhanced.
If you look at the network settings in modern Mac OS, the layout, the information that's provided is still the same that's shown here. When you go into the details and you look at your IP, subnet, I mean, it's the same everywhere. I mean, Windows has the same settings too, but the feel of it still feels the same as what we saw in 7.6.
So that it shows you only those parameters that you need to enter and makes it easier to make error-free configurations. To see the available configurations and to select one, go to the File menu and select Configurations. You can then use the arrow keys or the mouse to select a configuration that's saved and make it active. macOS 7.6 also includes the new Open Transport PPP software, which makes it so that you can connect your Macintosh to the internet over a modem. One of the other features that's a benefit of Open Transport is that it takes aggressive use of Apple's help systems. So let's take a look at an example of how Apple Guide can help you at configuring Open Transport PPP. One of the first steps that you need to do in setting up PPP is to configure and tell Open Transport what type of modem you have. So let's look at the
nightmare.
Let's look at Apple Guide helping you step through the various steps that you need to
That help was really
in order to
useful,
configure that
but
part of your system.
still a nightmare.
Apple Guide guides you through each of
Those
the
red
different
circles
features that you
showed
need to
up and it was like
customize.
magic. I remember showing people that when it would
And
guide
then
you
once
through
you
help
press
and it would
at
circle the
as
things on the
final
screen.
step, as you
And it didn't
control
matter
the
where
first
windows
control
were on your
panel,
screen.
it saves the
Those
configuration
red
settings
circles would highlight
and
what
makes
you
you
needed to
ready to
do
take your next
regardless
step.
of where things were laid out. It worked incredibly well.
Open Transport also includes new features for network managers, the most notable of which is the Advanced Administration Mode. The Administration Mode allows the network administrator both to password protect the network configuration and to lock individual parameters of Open Transport.
The
This can be
companies I
used
worked
to
for at that
minimize
time
the
had
number
no
of
idea how to
errors
do
that
this.
might get
Everything was
made
wide open. There was
when
no
a user has to
administration
customize
over
his own
Apple
parameter
hardware
of the
if you were
system.
lucky enough to have Apple
When
hardware where you were
the user
working.
mode is set back to either basic or advanced, you'll find that if the administrator has locked particular parameters, they are no longer editable.
But as an admin, you'd
These
really like
advanced
to be able to
features
do
give the
that.
network manager much more control over Open Transport systems in comparison to the old networking system. As we've seen in these demonstrations today, Open Transport delivers benefits for both network administrators and end users, making networking easier to use on the Macintosh.
Hi, I'm Adam Fingerman. I work in the AppleNet Product Marketing Group. Internet access is a very important component of the macOS 7.6, and Apple provides 3 ways of Internet access: America Online, CyberDog, and the Apple Internet Connection Kit. The Apple Internet Connection Kit is a suite of best-of-class Internet access applications that provide you with quick and easy direct Internet access via an Internet service provider. And best of all, the whole thing is integrated via Apple technologies. The Internet Connection Kit includes Netscape Navigator, the industry-leading browser software, Claris
Big
Emailer
deal.
Lite to help you manage your emails, a host of multimedia-rich plugins such as the QuickTime plugins, the Shockwave plugins, and the Real Audio plugin, and Apple-provided communication software to help you create an account with an ISP or import existing settings.
Hang on, before he continues about settings. Getting this software together from the computer manufacturer was a big deal. Everybody loaded software onto their computers at the time. I did tech support for Hewlett-Packard for a while, and when you would buy an HP Pavilion computer with the consumer-grade computer that Hewlett-Packard offered, it came with software, an email program, and a browser, tools to configure your internet connection, stuff like that, but it was junk. I mean, if I remember correctly, it came with Netscape Navigator or Netscape Communicator, and Communicator had an email program built into it. It also had a way to do FTP and stuff, but it was really, really, really awkward. Most of the time that I spent, except for people that lost their start menu and stuff because they didn't know that they could resize it or hide it or move it to the side of the screen. Most of the time when somebody called in for help, it was trying to get connected to the internet or try to use that software. And on the tech support side of things, the company that I worked for that did tech support for HP, we couldn't give a lot of support on that software because it wasn't Hewlett-Packard software. It was third-party software. There was a big disclaimer in the software package that said it's not covered by support. We did what we could, but we were limited for how long we were allowed to be on the phone with that customer. This stuff coming from Apple with really, really strong software at the time. Fetch for FTP, Claris for email, and of course Navigator. That was a powerful set of software, and it came as a software bundle. It was really, really easy to use, and that help, the guided help with the red circles, walked you through configuring a lot of that too. It worked pretty well. I mean, for not being direct Apple software, Apple sure covered their bases.
Audio plugin, and Apple-provided communication software to help you create an account with an ISP or import existing settings from an ISP that you already have. Let me show you the Apple Internet Dialer. If you need to create an account with an ISP or import the settings from an existing account, all you need to do is walk through the very short and straightforward interview process with the Apple Internet Dialer. The first thing you'll do is pick your modem type, select the modem port, indicate whether you have touch tone or pulse, and click on Create an Account. Then the Apple Internet...
A couple quick things. First of all, you had to have a modem that was supported by Apple, but that wasn't a big deal because Apple didn't have serial ports or USB ports. USB wasn't even a thing then. There was an Apple desktop bus port on the back and an Apple serial port. And depending on what hardware you had to plug into an Apple specific port for it. So if you had something that you could plug into your computer, it was going to be in that list. Then second, talked about tone and pulse. Right now, when you use your iOS phone or Android phone, you push a button, you hear a beep. Or if you use a old-fashioned like plug into the wall phone or a pay phone, if you can still find one of those, you push a button and you hear a beep. That's fine. the tone of when you push that button tells the phone or the phone system what number you pressed. Pulse is clicks. And the old-fashioned phones that had a circle on them with the numbers in a circle, and you'd put your finger in the hole and turn the dial, when you did that, it clicked a certain number of times. Those were pulses. It was the same thing as hanging up the phone really quickly and tapping on it. So if you were a super nerd back in the day and you wanted to show off to your friends, you could call your friend by picking up the handset, and the place where you hung up the handset had two little like posts on it. You could tap them really quickly to dial a phone number. So if you tapped it 3 times, you would make 3 pulses, and that'd be 3. Then you'd pause for a minute, you'd tap 1, that'd be 1. Then you tap it 3 more times, and that'd be 3, and that'd be area code 313. And you could dial the rest of the phone number that way too. There's tone and pulse information, but it was supported by Apple, supported by System 7.6.
Dialer walks you through a very simple interview type process, gathering some basic information about yourself, such as your name, your address, your city, state, zip code and phone number, and your credit card information. And when you're ready, you click on Next to proceed. An 800 number is dialed, and you're connected with an internet registration
I like that credit card number. He put a fake number that started 1, 2, 3, 4. So their software allowed him to put a fake number in. It didn't do any validation.
Find the best ISP that meets your needs. You click Configure. The appropriate settings are downloaded to your machine. Everything's set up. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, online ISP account creation. So once you're connected, Apple wants to make sure that you have the most enjoyable experience. And for this, we provided Apple Guides, which help you to use the internet. For example, if you wanted to learn how to find a QuickTime VR movie over the internet, you can start the Apple Internet Connection Kit guides and search through how do I view a movie. Click OK, and the Apple Internet Guide for Netscape Navigator will explain how movies come through the internet and then actually take you to a website which is a multimedia QuickTime gallery of movies.
Oh, frames. Look at the frames.
Then all you need to do is go to the
browser,
sample
frames in the
section,
browser. That was a big deal to have
find the
frames.
QuickTime VR movie you want, click on it, and off you go.
Maybe they didn't have the circles for the help in browser, but still. It walked you through stuff. I remember that. OpenDo. That's the copy paste I was talking about with
Hi, I'm Jim
CyberDog.
Black, component software evangelist for Apple Computer, and I'm going to talk to you about one of the most exciting technologies of macOS 7.6, something called OpenDo. OpenDo changes the way that developers write their software, and it changes the way that we use our software. Today,
Developers
we have
had to
specialized
support it. It just
applications
didn't
for
work by
different
itself.
data types.
That's important to remember.
We have word processors for text, we have image editing applications for graphics, and we have specialized applications for internet content or things such as QuickTime movies. It requires you to learn a suite of applications. OpenDo changes that by allowing you to concentrate on the document and combine all of these media types very easily through drag and drop. I'm going to give you an example of what that looks like. I'm going to create a corporate report using OpenDo components written by 3 different developers. The first thing I'm going to start with is Digital Harbor's Wave word processor. As you can see, it handles text. And like most Macintosh applications, we can drag in different data types, such as 2D graphics, a picture from the scrapbook here. But since it's an OpenDo word processor, we can also embed something else. Let's create a table of data showing coconut sales. So we drag in another component written by a company named Corda, and it handles tabular information. Let's drag in yet another to communicate that data in a graphical fashion, something written by a company called Adrenaline. And let's link up the information from one piece of software to another. I'm just dragging and dropping with the command key down.
He's making this look like it works every time.
So that as the information in the table
And it was
changes,
pretty good,
if we have to change
but
any of this information, it'll update.
I think I spent more time trying to get my data to work right than I did writing the actual document itself.
And it's very fast. Note also that when I click on this, the menus change. That's the standard OpenDo activation model, so that now this component has control of
This
the
is a
menus.
pretty
We also have
complicated thing
palette
to do,
cleanup.
especially at the time.
It allows
Big
us to
props for
control the
this.
functionality of this piece of software. Let's make it a little bit flashier. Let's drag in a graphic as a background. And let's change the bars to palm trees using a QuickDraw 3D meta file. I just drag it from the scrapbook. It's applied to the chart.
That's great. But if you
and
ever
back to the
if you
chart.
ever did something like that
Zoom
for
in
school
so we can
or in
see
the
results
office,
a little bit better. And we can even
somebody would
use
appreciate it, but at the same time, you'd get
sliding
feedback
feature to make it a little bit
that
splashier.
it's hard to read,
So what we've done
misrepresentative.
is create a business report by dragging and dropping that contains a 2D picture, a 3D graph, and a table of information. Instead of having to launch 4 different
LTTstore.com.
applications to manage these various data types, we just drag them into one document. So the user model with OpenDoc is very much improved and simpler to learn than it is today. OpenDoc also makes it easy to combine internet content and cutting-edge technologies into your documents. For example, one of the most exciting technologies recently is Java, but you can only use Java inside of a web browser today. Thanks to OpenDoc, you can use the power of Java applets inside of applications like
That's
your
true
word
at the time.
processor, or your
Java
spreadsheet, or your database,
Java
so
was
long as they
browser
support
technology
OpenDoc.
then.
For example,
plugin.
here we are in Digital Harbor's Wave again. I'll drag in Apple's Java applet viewer and drag in the URL for an applet.
He's got to have a lot of memory in this
The
computer that he's
applet
demoing
runs
it.
in place, and now we can view
It's probably a
this 3D
top-of-the-line
structure
machine.
in the context of our word processor, even though the word processor itself doesn't explicitly support Java. Another exciting technology, of course, is Netscape plugins. Netscape plugins can handle a variety of formats: shockwave, real audio, streaming audio. In this case, I'm using a Netscape plugin that displays 3D molecular information. Now this is being handled by CyberDog, so this information is actually coming across the internet. If I click in place on this molecule and go to
That's
the About
complicated.
box,
A Netscape
we can go to the
plugin
homepage for this
that is using
particular company's
CyberDog to bring the
product
data in
directly from
and present it
within
in
our
a
word
in
processor.
a document.
The beauty of this is we don't have to worry about whether we can configure our web browser or whether we have the correct software. OpenDoc just handles it automatically. So the beauty of OpenDoc is that I can use cutting-edge technologies and internet content directly inside of my word processor, my spreadsheet, or my database, any OpenDoc software, just through dragging and dropping.
Well, thank you for your attention. We've covered a lot of information today about macOS 7.6. We encourage you to check out the following locations for more information.
OpenDoc was probably the most important technological feature for System 7.6. They kept it for the end. That makes sense. But there was so much you could do with it. It's hard to explain how complicated it was or what it could do for you. But it really was a really big change in connecting software to do things between applications. Windows had, what was it called? Windows did have a fancy clipboard feature that was similar. I can't remember the name of it. Everything else in there is stuff that we take for granted today. OpenDoc and the ability to do stuff like that as easily as you could then would be pretty impressive, even by today's standards. There's ways to do it. Most software can handle that kind of stuff. You can embed stuff into Word documents. You can do it in Google Docs. If you think of everything we just looked at and you consider Steve Jobs on a stage, black turtleneck, presenting that to consumers, is there anything in there other than maybe some of the AV features, the multimedia features? What would impress an audience then versus what would impress an audience today? All that stuff is just taken for granted today. But at the time, it was pretty exciting, but I just can't imagine it getting any kind of reaction nowadays. Appreciate what you've got today and think about what we used 20, 30 years ago by comparison. I hope you had fun watching that video with me. I thought there would be more stuff to make fun of in there. It was just fun in general to look at. Next time we look at a video together, maybe a few laughs, but this time was mostly informative. I hope you had fun with me. Thanks.